Good evening to you. Thank you for being here with us on From the South. My name is Regan Levines. Here are this evening's headlines. The opposition gets a supermajority in Venezuela's National Assembly. We have a special report on how communities are organizing to respond. Colombia's FARC issues an apology for accidentally killing civilians back in 2002. And Donald Trump in the spotlight again, this time for his divisive statements about Muslims. The details on these stories and more now.
This is not conservatism.
In communities across Venezuela, grassroots activists are discussing how to respond to the massive majority won by the opposition in parliamentary elections over the weekend. President Nicolas Maduro has called for a special conference of the United Socialist Party from Thursday. But in shanty towns like Las Torres, activists say they are already organizing to push the revolution forward, as Isabel Finbo found out.
Las Torres Community Council has called an extraordinary meeting. It meets every fortnight to assess residents' needs, but today it's going to discuss the government's loss in Sunday's National Assembly elections.
The fight continues. We're not going to stop. This does not mean that we have lost everything in the country, only that we will continue advancing and continue organising the people. We are getting together in the communities to try to resolve problems.
High up on the hill overlooking Caracas, popular organisation is strong here. The community is used to making decisions about things that affect it. Across the country, communities like this will be holding discussions in the coming weeks, as President Nicolas Maduro has called for a time of debate, consultation and action after the opposition gained an unprecedented victory.
We lost the battle but not the war. We have to have our boots on and be ready to continue forward.
I ask the people to have patience, and right now we must continue forward with the legacy of Hugo Chavez.
Today a market selling food at state-subsidised or regulated prices is visiting this otherwise isolated community. The neighbourhood has been transformed by social housing and health missions, and it will fight to keep them.
Look at how the neighbourhood is. It's lovely. Before there was no road. There was nothing. Thanks to the community council, everything has worked out.
The Socialist Party might have lost the election, but life here in Las Torres goes on. This is not a time for sadness or resentment, but a time for reflection and moreover for action. Isabel Finbo, Telesur in Caracas.
The final official results from Sunday's elections show that Venezuela's opposition MUD coalition has won a two-thirds majority in the National Assembly. The National Electoral Council, or CNE, has confirmed that the last two outstanding seats have gone to the opposition, giving it 109 seats. They can also expect support from the three indigenous legislators who are aligned with the right wing. This would give them 112 votes needed to call for a referendum to oust President Nicolas Maduro, to reappoint Supreme Court judges, or to call a special assembly to rewrite the constitution.
The parliamentary faction of the Democratic Unity is made up of 112 deputies, which is a majority. This is the truth, I repeat, in light of the vote.
In Colombia, a delegation of the FARC guerrillas has apologized for a massacre committed back in 2002 when they killed between 80 and over 100 people in the western village of Boyaja. Rebel leader Felix Antonio Munoz Lascaro, alias Pastor Alape, affirmed his responsibility in the massacre but underscored that the rebels did not intend to kill the civilians. On May 2, 2002, during the conflict against the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, the FARC launched a handmade projectile at the paramilitary group which was hiding near a church. Instead of hitting the troops, the projectile exploded on the church where some of the 300 townspeople were hiding.
For 13 years, a wrenching pain has weighed on our shoulders. It has affected everyone, all of you. We have recognized the fact and reiterated our deep regrets for a result that we did not want nor sought it.
Cuba and U.S. officials have begun to untangle one of the most complex obstacles to the normalization of their relations. The claims of billion-dollar compensation for the nationalization of U.S. companies, as well as Cuban counterclaims for damages caused by the U.S. blockade. Nearly 6,000 U.S. corporations and individuals were awarded almost $2 billion for factories, farms, homes, and other assets that were nationalized on the island after Fidel Castro's rebels came to power on July 1st, 1959. Those claims are now worth roughly $8 billion, considering a 6% annual interest. Cuban law ties the settlement to U.S. reparations for damages resulting from the blockade and other acts of the country's aggression against Cuba. This damage is estimated within a range of $121 billion to more than $300 billion.
The Cuban government's position always was to compensate the owners of those companies, the big companies that were harmed in the nationalization. That was done with Spain. They nationalized everything from Spanish companies to wineries, and Cuba paid them. They paid them with an agreement with the government of Spain, which took the payment and carried it as debt. Cuba paid those compensations with the United States. Cuba paid those compensations. With the United States, it wanted to do that, but when ties were broken, when there wasn't trade with Cuba, without sugar quotas, there was no way because the compensation was about trade with the United States.
At the COP21 conference, the Caribbean and Latin American countries have joined the global call for a legally binding agreement that would see rich northern nations lead a global transition to clean energy by transferring technology and finance to poorer countries in the global south. The Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, presented the region's position at the summit in Paris. CELAC urged world leaders to agree to a deal to limit global warming to 1.5 or maximum 2 degrees Celsius, the tipping point scientists say would push the planet into catastrophic and irreparable damage.
We are the ones who are calling to have an in-depth discussion about what it is equity in this agreement. It goes beyond sovereignty. It's more linked with the right to develop, to the right to still preserve your sovereign rights to develop your own models to development nationally, your own economical guidance in your country, and not having someone else deciding from your country what things you should be doing, which kind of enterprises, which kind of development.
Moving to Peru next, our correspondent there investigates the role indigenous people play in protecting the Amazon, which contains over half the world's rainforest.
While the Peruvian government is making commitments at the UN Climate Change Conference in Paris, Quechua indigenous people from the Amazon rainforest are organizing to prevent further development concessions in their ancestral land.
Las empresas no respetan eso. Los migrantes no respetan.
The companies and the migrants do not respect the forest, since we currently don't have the title deeds that recognize us as the true owners. That's why we at SEPCA are encouraging the indigenous communities to organize and consolidate more and more, so that they can defend their territories as they have done for thousands of years.
The Quechua people from the San Martin region of Peru know only too well how deforestation is caused by development projects like cattle ranching and palm oil plantations.
Eran bosques primarios, bosques vírgenes, bosques
These were virgin, primary forests. For our communities, they were untouchables. Nonetheless, the companies got the relevant permit from the state's authorities, and they chopped it all down.
Han logrado el permiso y sin embargo esto, como se dice, lo han tumbado todo.
A study by the Institute for the Common Good shows how indigenous people act as protectors of the rainforest, benefiting the whole planet. Nonetheless, their territories continue to be under threat.
In Peru, it's an extreme case. 100% of the indigenous territories have some form of threat, face some form of threat or pressure. 100% of the protected natural areas are facing some form of threat or pressure.
Peru was responsible for 9% of all deforestation in the Amazon rainforest between 2010 and 2013. That percentage oscillates from year to year, but the basic pattern remains. Rael Mora, Telesur, Peru.
And as international leaders meet at the World Climate Change Conference in Paris, a new report shows that Haiti, Burma and Honduras are the world's most vulnerable countries to the consequences of climate change. Our correspondent Gerardo Torres has more.
Honduras, Haiti and Burma are the world's more vulnerable countries to climate change, according to a report presented at the International Leaders Meeting of Climate Change Conference in Paris. In all three cases, the increased occurrence of floodings, droughts and the impacts of natural phenomena are affecting these countries. In Honduras in particular, the lack of capacity to respond to climate change largely stems from the historical exploitation policies promoted by governments that increase the destruction of the environment.
The colonizers of different origins always base their wealth and their actions in the country with the theory of dispossession and appropriation of our natural patrimony. That began with the deforestation, when Francis Drake converted a mahogany tree into a desk that was given to King of England, and then he was named Sir Francis Drake. Followed by the mines and the banana field concessions, it seems that they changed the Bible principles that said grow, multiply and dominate the land to consume, impoverish and destroy the land.
Con las concesiones bananeras. Entonces pareciera que se cambió un precepto bíblico de crecer, multiplicar y dominar la tierra por consumir, empobrecer y destruir la tierra.
Honduras is a Central American country with the largest plantations of monocultural bananas, African palm trees and watermelons. It is also the country with the most money handed to mining transnational companies by the government. Recently, President Juan Orlando Hernández assured that his government will decisively face climate change, but has been unwilling to address the state policies that have continued to support the exploitation of national resources. Instead, he is asking for the support of international cooperation funds to face the consequences of climate impacts.
The
state policies that privilege the cultivation of agribusiness are responsible for the country's ability to address climate change. Even when the president declared that the responsibility is shared, he is looking for international funding, but not really willing to make the necessary land use according to the country's geological situation.
In 2015, more than 2 million campesinos were affected in Honduras due to climate change. Flooding is common across Honduras cities. As usual, the poor are the most impacted. Even though the country is not a major contributor to global warming, its natural and political conditions make it one of the biggest victims. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says that he hopes negotiations will lead to a ceasefire in Syria. Countries involved in the peace process are scheduled to meet in New York on December 18th. This follows the historic talks in November, which resulted in an agreement on a 2-year timeline leading to Syrian national elections. Ahead of the talks, Saudi Arabia will be hosting a conference to try to unite Syria's divided rebel and opposition groups, which are trying to forge a common platform to be able to negotiate with the Syrian government. And Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says that terrorist groups cannot be commissioned to fight other terrorist groups. He is advocating for the creation of safe zones in Syria, where the citizens there can forge their own future.
Değerli kardeşlerim, bu bakımdan terörden arındırılmış.
We insist on creation of safe zones liberated from terror and implementation of proposals to train and equip moderate opposition. This is the only way to achieve a viable result in the fight against Daesh and the Syrian regime.
Ve rejime karşı sonuç alıcı bir mücadele ancak bu şekilde mümkün olabilir.
Telesur's Hazem de Abdullah has more.
Various factions and opposition political currents which still operate in Syria have been meeting in Damascus. For the first time, representatives from the Czech Republic, Iran, Iraq and Palestine also talk about.
We call the world to respect the demands of the Syrian people to decide their own fate, and we emphasize that any change or reform must come from the Syrian people themselves. No one from outside is entitled to set himself up as representative of the Syrian people.
The participants in Damascus say that the meeting comes in the absence of an international solution to the Syrian crisis and the growing threat of terrorism. They aim to put forward what they call a national roadmap. The meeting stressed a number of key points, including a settlement of Syrian crisis based on the Geneva decisions and the meetings in Moscow, followed by the establishment of a national unity government as well as action against terrorism. It also stressed the unity of Syria above all political difference and the role of the Syrian Arab Army as the mainstay of the state and the protector of its citizens.
It's no coincidence that this conference is taking place at the same time as the external opposition meeting, which is sponsored by those conspiring against Syria. We hope from our conference to send a clear message about our rejection of foreign intervention, and we hope to send a true picture of the Syrian opposition, which is working for the people and not under orders from the West.
The importance of this conference is that it coincides with the efforts by the West and its allies to unite the Syrian external opposition along with the representative of the militant fighters in the Saudi capital in an attempt to reach an agreement before Geneva III. Hazem Abdullah, Telesur, Syria.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has appointed a new head of the country's intelligence agency, the Mossad. 54-year-old current National Security Advisor Yossi Cohen will replace Tamir Pardo, who had taken up the position back in 2011. The Mossad has been accused of interfering in the politics of various countries in the past. Recent investigations say it could be behind the death of Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat, among other crimes.
I want to thank the Prime Minister for his trust, as I said last night. I'm very thrilled from the magnitude of this event and the importance of the nomination. It's an important organization. I intend to do my utmost to bring good intelligence to the people of Israel, to do it quietly, modestly, and with confidence. I wish the people of Israel, the Mossad, its employees, and commanders all the good and successful years of security and intelligence.
An Israeli military court has sentenced a leftist Palestinian lawmaker to 15 months in jail. Telesur's Noor Harazin with those details.
An Israeli military court sentenced Palestinian lawmaker Khalida Jarrar Monday to 15 months in prison. Jarrar, 52 years old, was detained from her home in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah last April on charges of incitement of violence and membership to an illegal organization. The Palestinian Prisoners' Affairs Minister Isa Qaraqi confirmed that her sentence was politically motivated, pointing out that it comes within the framework of a general campaign launched by the Israeli forces against the Palestinian lawmakers. Jarrar was fined 10,000 shekels, which is $2,582, and given a sentence of 5 years in jail.
Arresting Comrade Khalida Jarrar is sort of a collective punishment against the Palestinian people. The sentence comes within a wider context of all kinds of suppressive measures taken by Israel against the Palestinian people in a bid to stop the resistance of the Palestinians. Israel has no consideration for Palestinian leaders and officials. Israel believes that all Palestinians are their enemies. Israel assassinated Palestinian leaders even after the peace agreements that were signed. It also arrested Palestinians, many of them lawmakers.
حتى بعد توقيع الاتفاقيات الموقعة معها وهي التي اعتقلت العديدين من أعضاء المجلس التشريعي.
In August 2014, the Israeli forces issued a decision ordering the transfer of the leftist parliamentarian from her place of residence in Ramallah to Jericho for 6 months, claiming she poses a threat to the security of the region. However, Jarrar revoked the decision. In 2006, Jarrar was elected to the Palestinian Legislative Council for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, PLFP, and was appointed the head of the Prisoners Committee of the PLC. According to the Ministry of Prisoners Affairs, 5 out of 132 Palestinian lawmakers are arrested in the Israeli jails, 2 of whom are in administrative detention, while 3 others, including Ahmed Saadat, Marwan al-Barghouthi, and Khalida Jarrar, have been sentenced. Noor Harazin, Telesu TV, Gaza.
Donald Trump, the leading U.S. Republican presidential candidate, is raising eyebrows again after he said that all Muslims should be temporarily barred from entering the United States until the Obama administration can get things under control. Fellow Republicans have called Trump's comments xenophobic and anti-American.
Normally, I do not comment on what's going on in the presidential election. I will take an exception today. This is not conservatism. What was proposed yesterday is not what this party stands for, and more importantly, it's not what this country stands for.
And the United Nations Refugee Agency said that growing anti-Muslim sentiment is threatening a key refugee resettlement program in the United States.
Normally, I do not comment on what's going on in the presidential election. I will take an exception today. This is not conservatism. What was proposed yesterday is not what this party stands for, and more importantly, it's not what this country stands for.
I'm sorry, that was supposed to have been Melissa Fleming, spokesperson for the UN Refugee Agency. She said, we have a very strong resettlement program to the United States, and the resettlement program includes Syrian refugees. We're talking about Syrian refugees today, and we're concerned that the rhetoric that is being used in the election campaign is putting incredibly important resettlement program at risk. That is meant for the most vulnerable people, the victims of the war, and the world is unable to stop. Moving on now, here now is a brief look at other news stories around the world.
A Nigerian couple living in Britain have been sentenced to 6 years each in prison. They were arrested in March and convicted in November, accused of cruelty to a child under 16, servitude and assisting unlawful immigration. They had kept a man as a slave for 24 years. US band Eagles of Death Metal returned to Paris with the assistance of rock band U2. The Eagles band had been playing at one of the locations, the Bataclan Theatre, that was attacked by Muslim extremists weeks ago. 89 people had died at the Bataclan. In total, 130 people were killed that evening. And researchers in Russia are experimenting to determine whether the acute sense of smell that rats have can be used to detect bombs or to help people buried under rubble. The tests focus on the movement of the rats' brain waves when they smell something that they've been trained to identify.
South African sprinter and convicted murderer Oscar Pistorius has been granted bail to the amount of $700. Sentencing has been postponed to April 2016. He also has been mandated to hand over his passport, and he will be electronically tagged so that authorities constantly know his whereabouts. The manslaughter conviction he had previously been handed was overturned last week. Reports are that he intends to appeal the court's decision as he now faces a minimum sentence of 15 years in prison. And before we leave you, remember you can join us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter for more on these and other stories. Also, for extensive coverage on developing stories, you can visit our website, telesurdtv.net/English. For Telesud English, I'm Regan Devines. Have a great evening. Bye.